In many ways, the Philippines is confronting a double Cold War. The bigger one is between the United States and China. And as that geopolitical competition festers, the Philippines is also feeling its repercussions. So far, the Philippines is at least holding its own line in the West Philippine Sea against encroachment by the Asian superpower. But there's another Cold War, on a far smaller scale but far more ferocious, that is going on inside the Philippines. This is between the House of Marcos and the House of Duterte. Since earlier this year, the former president and increasingly his offspring have openly attacked the incumbent. They have questioned his legitimacy. There have been even personal insults, and at times there were even hints of open rebellion. If anything, former President Rodrigo Duterte even enticed or tried to call on the Philippine Armed Forces to go against their commander-in-chief. Or at least that's how critics see it. The former president even suggested separation of Mindanao from the rest of the Philippines. Meanwhile, his daughter, Sara Duterte, has relinquished her position in the cabinet of Marcos Jr., and if anything, is presenting herself as a de facto leader of a burgeoning Duterte-led opposition in the upcoming midterm elections. The Duterte camp accuses the administration of orchestrating potential impeachment against Sara Duterte, why a potential ICC case and other Philippine Congress-backed cases could also haunt the rest of the Duterte family. Against this backdrop, Vice President Sara Duterte had a particularly contentious budget hearing in the Philippine House of Representatives after a not-so-friendly one also in the upper house. Not long after her back and forth with Senator Riza Ontiveros, Sara Duterte had even a more ferocious back and forth with members of the House of Representatives. At times, she even gave up on defending the office of the Vice President's budget. For her, what was happening is nothing less than political persecution and witch hunt. So what is the real score of this Cold War between the Dutertes and Marcoses? To what degree do the Dutertes truly represent the aspirations and hopes and the mandate of the Mindanao people? And what was the drama inside the House of Representatives during that particular contentious budget hearing? In order to understand these issues, we have a special guest, someone who has been at the very front row of Mindanao politics and literally in the latest controversial budget hearing. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Congressman Zia, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This was years in the making. Eventually, thank God, we were able to make this happen in very good time. So recently, we had budget hearings. You had a lot of cameo, more than cameo in those budget hearings, and the whole Shimanat, everything that came out of there. You come from Mindanao. You come from the Muslim community in the Philippines.
Yeah,
Barm,
right.
a lot of things happening. So ang dami natin pag-usapan over the next 30-40 minutes. But let's first start with the budget hearings.
Yeah.
Kamusta yung recent budget hearings? And
which agency are you talking about?
well, I mean, let's first start with the ones you had a lot of cameo in and got a lot of media traction.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you saw those back and forth between the vice president, some members? With all due respect to the chairwoman, it looks like there are times I'm not sure if anyone is in charge. There was clearly Zarzuela, if I can put it that way. Yeah.
I'll tell you this, Richard. Nobody was actually ready for that kind of scene to happen, right? So I was there. I was the first one to arrive in the room. So I was just chatting and then glancing over the documents, etc., the data that were placed on our table para maging ready. So what's going to be the questions would be asked, because I tried to ready myself with the possible questions from my colleagues. I was told actually that I'll be sponsoring the office of the Vice President a week before.
Right.
A week before. And then I was actually looking at all the documents when I didn't notice the Vice President when she came in to the room. I actually was very, I was really focused on the data and not really the data, the presentation that the OVP would present, no? And so I did not notice her at first. And when somebody said, "Oh, this is Vice President pala," that's the time I stood up. Of course, I had to extend that courtesy and to welcome her.
Of course, yeah.
And when everyone was ready, and the Vice President, actually, I felt that there was a degree of discomfort on her part. Like she already had this bias, like the House of Representatives
that they'll be hostile to you.
It's very obvious. Right. It's very obvious when she had the opening remarks, because normally we give our, the agencies, the head of the agencies, the time to appraise us, their opening remarks. So the opening, actually, the remarks of the Vice President was replete with all the issues that confronts her, and the way she relates with with certain
You mean she
issues
was
like
presenting herself as a victim
W,
of a persecution and witch hunt? Is that the...
yes, WPS, her position. And I understand that because that's her personal take on matters. But these are entirely not part of the budget, right? And so already had that feeling that this might be a sort of not the usual budget briefing that we normally see and hear, and for agencies to present. But the exchanges was a bit unexpected, I would say.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, you had the Riza Ontiveros,
Yeah,
Vice
remember
President.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, it was not as adversarial, but didn't that give you a warning that it could get
It did actually,
hotter
as a,
down?
as a sponsor. I already had that feeling, pero not as, I wasn't
Hostile,
really expecting that hostility, right? The name callings and etc. Everyone was actually caught unsurprised and unprepared for that, especially me. That's why I kept on, scratching my head. What's
Yeah, I
going
could
to
see
happen?
your discomfort very visible. Yeah.
Exactly, and yeah, I watched the exchanges between the Vice President and Senator Risa Hontiveros. This is nothing compared to what we've seen in the House pre-briefing. But at least at the end of the day, when it was suspended, immediately after the suspension, actually I approached the Vice President while she was exiting the building. On her way out, I approached her and asked her for a meeting between my office and her office, so that we would be able to at least get something from her, from her office, at least the rationale or the reason why all these listed programs that she intends to keep and continue on. At least I have a way of maybe explaining it to the members of the House once we reach the stage of in the plenary debate, right? And she was welcoming. She was cordial. I would say that. I should say that at least, no.
Yeah, the Dutertes are very charming person.
Yes,
I think for
yes.
anyone
And
who knows
she's
us,
very accommodating.
yeah.
She said, "Okay, we'll set up the meeting." I actually mistaken her spokesperson to be her chief of staff. I
Yeah.
thought that the guy was her chief of staff.
Right.
It was only in the news that I learned that this was her
Si attorney,
spokesperson.
yeah,
Yes, so
yeah.
I asked the Vice President, maybe your chief of staff can sit down with my chief of staff if you're not
Yeah.
available. I know both of us are really busy, no? And so she said, that's not my chief of staff. So
Spokesman.
yeah, it's a spokesman. So
Were you the only Mindanao leader in the top leadership of the committee? Were you the only one from Mindanao?
No, we're about, I think we're about 5, 6, because there are plenty of vice chairpersons.
Of course,
right?
yeah.
And the senior among us is Congresswoman Stella Kimbo. And so there's me, of course. There's I think Joboy Aquino
Right.
from Butuan. There's also, I forgot the rest. I should not mention names. Baka sabihin nila, baka naman ako nakalimutan.
I was just the reason
But
I'm
there are
mentioning that.
plenty of almost Mindanaoan congressmen.
Yeah, and I
who
was just
sit as
wondering in
vice
terms
chair.
of course, because with the Dutertes, there's always this package of Mindanao. It's a different sensibility, it's a different mindset, etc. Which we'll discuss more later. I was just wondering about that because if you were like the only Mindanaoan, maybe that you could have been the bridge.
Maricar
I was
Zamora.
wondering along those lines.
No.
Yeah, communication channels. Yeah.
No, before me, last year was Maricar Zamora, Representative
Right.
Maricar Zamora.
Right.
From, I guess, Davao Oriental, if I'm not mistaken. So she's one of the vice chairpersons. So marami kami. There's plenty of Mindanaoan Congress persons who are also sitting as a vice chairperson.
Commerce, yeah, you are a fixture Mindanao politics, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way, in a sense that, we've got to know you from the days of Marawi,
Yeah.
the spokesman for
Exactly, yeah.
really people on the
And we're
ground.
supposed to have this
Yes,
interview
long time
way,
ago,
way
yeah.
long
And I
time
visited
ago.
also
Yeah,
Marawi and all,
exactly,
but
yeah.
thank God, this conversation is still happening. Under even more, I would say compelling circumstances, or as compelling for that matter. I mean, going back to this, the Dutertes better than most people. I mean, in my case, I had to get to know him because I had to write a book on him shamelessly,
Of
and all of
course.
that. Um, are you surprised by quote unquote her performance, her ability to handle pressure? Because I would have imagined her father, who served also in the Congress, perhaps not the most stellar record, but the father, even at the more advanced age, all of us have met him, know that he has this ability to. He's very spontaneous. He's very witty. I mean, you may
Yeah.
not agree with his
And
joke.
smart, I should
Very
say.
smart,
Very
and
smart.
he knows how to navigate.
Exactly.
Even the most hostile and crack a joke and everything.
Yeah.
He has that ability to read the vibration in the room. I noticed that once in Malacanang, like once he saw bordang tao, biglang magmumura siya. Like, sabi ko, this guy has a timing. He's almost like a stand-up comedian, right? He reads the room very well. So I could see a performer. Sarah doesn't seem to have that. Am I wrong? Or it's just that her circumstances are so different from her dad? Because a lot of us, I mean, I separately talk to other people from Mindanao, whether it's Justice Carpio from Davao and all. They have their own theories on this. What is your theory of the case?
My take actually, well, I don't know them personally, right?
To the
Politically,
degree that we know,
yes,
yeah.
yes, but their name is very popular. Even
Especially in Mindanao, yeah.
even before he was the father, still then a mayor, he was really popular because there's a sizable number of Maranaos from
in
Marawi
Davao.
City who are residing up to now residing in Davao City, and the the exchange of goods. There were some even in the past local trading that's been going on between areas in central before the arm. We used to be part of the northern central Mindanao, so there
Yes.
was a
Interface,
interface in
yeah.
terms of trade, etc. So the Dutertes are quite popular even at that time. But my take before, if you compare that to her father, remember the father was sitting president,
Yeah.
and in terms of his access to many concerns, the security of his office is
Right.
quite, he's quite secured, right? So maybe that level of comfort, that level of
medyo
comfort,
insulated
exactly
from pressure.
This is
and
my personal take, right? So he
Yeah.
calls the shots. So the president calls
right.
the shots. But in this case, VP Inday Sara is the vice president. So though he may be part of that in the echelon, in the top offices, but he's still vulnerable to attacks because he's the vice president and basically
Not the
when so-
commander-in-chief.
not the
Exactly.
commander-in-chief. So he reports to a certain person who is top of her, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of
And she's not on good terms with
exactly.
nowadays.
So in
yeah.
terms of political security, I could be wrong. She may be vulnerable compared to her
Yeah.
father. That is my take. That's why she is more of a palaban in a way, no?
She has to fight back strong. She cannot be as relaxed as the
As
father and
relaxed as the
self-assured because he
father.
was the boss. He was the
Exactly.
commander-in-chief.
Yes,
right?
that's right.
And probably even misogyny, to be fair about this. Probably, like the aspect, I mean, we have patriarchal values in this country. Do you read that maybe there's also an element of misogyny?
I don't think so. For me personally, it's more like a place in the political spectrum at this point in time. Remember,
Yeah.
Sara Duterte before 2 years ago was very friendly with the president, right?
Yeah.
When the unity was still intact, and sadly, the break away and the break apart
Yeah.
happened so soon. I mean, before the midterm election, I would have expected it to be more robust,
Yeah.
coming the last portion of the 3-year,
Right. Or to keep it
remaining
within,
years
yeah.
of the administration. They could have, but I don't know. As for me, it's more like the sense of the vulnerability politically. That's to me is where
Yeah.
she's getting all this, I guess, this hostility, if you may call it,
Right.
right?
So
She needs to fight. I think she needs to fight back in a way because for political survival, and to be able also to be positioning herself now. I guess she's now trying to present herself as the leader of the opposition, right? And
Yeah.
she needs to really take the challenge, and be the person that the opposition now is trying to project, that she is now
It's
the one.
weird to see her. I mean, with all due
No.
respect, Congressman, I'm sure, Rizal Tiveros and the Liberals or the Makabayan Bloc will have their ideas like,
We have a very
how are
in
you
this
an
country-
opposition? Like,
Well, in the country, unfortunately, in the Philippines, we have a very, very funny way of, defining what's opposition is,
Opposition,
what's
yeah.
not, because we have multi-party system,
Yeah.
right? So anybody can be friends with anybody.
Yeah.
Certain issues, maybe you might be surprised that there are adversaries politically, but on certain issues join together, right?
Yeah.
So we have a very funny of determining which one is opposition and which one is
medyo
not.
too fluid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Medyo anything goes, open season. Going back to this again, one of the things that the vice president mentioned, I don't know if he got it from my podcast or something, or tweet, like impeachment. That there's,
yeah.
from some of my sources, like, again, just to be clear, I never said like there's a push to impeach her. I said there may be sufficient number of open to the idea.
So it started. It's
Probably.
from your podcast. So
It
kasi-
probably started with a Twitter podcast we had, because someone joked like if Sarah were asked where did you get it, probably she would have had to name drop someone like me or something. And, I had my sources, and just on the record, I know that Congressman Erwin Tulfo made it absolutely clear there's no impeachment whatsoever, and this
Right.
is just a rumor. But why would the vice president come out and say something like that? Na may plano sila impeach ako. Is this part of her projection of herself as a victim, or she's probably genuinely threatened?
Well, it could be. It could be both, right?
It could be both.
It could be both.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. But just to address the issue of impeachment, I'm a Muslim, and it's for a Muslim to swear on something. It's really
Right.
matters, right? So there's no such thing as impeachment, no, that is now being discussed in the House of Representatives. As far as I'm concerned, I've been attending the session, committee hearings. There's not even a talk,
A hint
even
of
even a hint,
Because
or
she
even
said
a
we have
joke.
friends in the Congress who are telling me things, parang something like
But
that.
she
Bulong-bulong
has
daw,
to. She
yeah.
has to. She has to. I think she has to ask her friends.
Yeah.
Where do they get all this information? Because there's no such thing as talk of impeachment.
And there's no time, right? I mean,
and if you ask me personally, I
Yeah.
would go against that because it's counterproductive. Remember, we've actually achieved so much in the House of Representatives. We've actually delivered 100% of the LEDAC priorities of the president. So it would
would distract
be a
and all,
distraction.
yeah.
It would it's counterproductive. Remember, we're now moving towards the midterm elections, and imagine if you're spending the entire resources of the House and the country as a whole, right? Because if you file for an impeachment, it's not really a question of filing really Christian. It's a question of winnability.
Yeah.
Do you even have the number to bring this to the Senate? And if it's already in the Senate, do you have the assurance that you would see the end result that you hope to see, right? So everything is about political capital. And right now, I don't see any reason why there should be any impeachment that should be pushed by this administration, because it's counterproductive.
and there's not enough time, is it? I mean,
Exactly.
like it's September 30, I think it's the break
Exact-
time na. Diba? Like,
Exactly. It's counterproductive. So it does not do any good to anyone. I mean, politically, even the current administration, what would they get from impeaching her?
Unless
I mean,
it's a
ask me.
psychological game.
You're a political analyst, right? So you
Unless
tell
it's
me.
a psychological game, Congressman Zia. My
Oh.
understanding is maybe there's some people who want her to just run for office
Maybe
at the
that's-
local level and just give up the VP and, I don't know, run
It
back
could-
for the vow or something.
could-
They want to push her out.
It could be many
Preemptive
things.
resignation.
It could be many things, but I guess she needs to question the motive of her friends by saying that.
You think she has questionable informants?
Yeah, because it has no basis at all. And if you look at the current trend right now, for the administration to really say, for example, even plan of ousting her through impeachment process, it does not any good to this administration's
Yeah.
plan of pushing for economic reforms, etc. I know if you're not entirely friends with the current administration, there's really that possibility
Yeah.
of at least reducing your power. But to the extent of removing you with that support, look
Yeah.
at what's happening right now. I don't think the current administration would willing to, risk their political capital so they can create another chaos again.
Especially if
Disunity
it could
again.
be a blowback also and show
Exactly.
them more
At
as a
saka
victim. Yeah.
narinig ko kay Harry Roque, I think one of his statements, narinig daw niya, it's not, hindi kanya kinute. Sabi niya sa
Yeah.
bolang kristal niya. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's the bolang kristal, it's your podcast.
I think we have a non-aggression pact of not mentioning. But going back to this, Congressman Zia, well, I see where you're coming from, but from a legal standpoint, some people would argue maybe there's enough ground to file for impeachment.
But that's another story.
That's
a
another
different
story
case.
because you're talking about the politics.
Yes.
Some we're talking about, if you look at the confidential fund situation, even the unwillingness of the vice president to even explain, like, I forego. I mean, have you ever seen anything like that? I forego the opportunity to
But
defend my
all
budget.
of these things are popping up after the briefing. We're talking about the insinuation that there's a
Impeachment
rumor
plan.
impeachment, which
Yeah.
has nothing to do with the ones that is now being discussed.
Right. So you're saying this is
outright. That's
a
another
political, legit,
Yes.
authoritative
Yeah. So
approach.
if you're telling me because of the allegations of the notice of disallowances, but it's not executory, no, it's not
Right.
final yet. So there are still process, there's appeal, etc. But looking at that angle, that's a different story altogether. Again,
Yeah.
no? I'm just responding to the issue of her friends telling her that there is
Yeah.
a motive.
But it doesn't exclude the possibility that some may find legitimate legal grounds, which is a completely different issue.
It's
discussion.
completely different
Yeah,
issue. And let's personally, being part of the Committee on Appropriations, I don't want to just jump over to a conclusion right away.
Of course.
And so I do not want to preempt the process, right? So
Right.
my take on that is if there are legal basis for any initiative, for example, leading to that, I would personally, my take is I would personally look at the possible
Right.
allegations and maybe, just appreciate the merits if there are merits. But then again, I'm just one person, a
ibang
member of
usapan
the
yun.
300.
Exactly.
The issue of impeachment really, Christian, as we have seen it throughout these impeachment processes that we experienced now in the time of Estrada and then the late Chief Justice, it's actually boils down to the issue of numbers, right? But then again, right now in the House of Representatives, although we have the supermajority, but the composition of that majority bloc is really towards supporting the Bagong Pilipinas, Servicio Fair, delivering basic services, delivering 100% the LEDAC priority of the president. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about how to create chaos, political chaos, and division of the House. Because remember, we still have 3 years for this administration to really deliver their promises. So again, it's another story.
Yeah.
Let's sabi nga nila, the usual na phrase na gusto nila, let's cross the bridge when we get there. But from this point on, I would say categorically, unequivocal na wala talagang pinag-usapan na impeachment.
Thank you for that, Congressman Zia. Richard, by the way, I know I and Christian always get mistaken.
I'm sorry,
interchangeable. No, it's just kidding.
Richard, sorry.
It happens all the time. It goes both ways, so it's fair. I'll take that as a compliment. We're great colleagues and friends. Going back to this, Congressman Zia, one of the things I always wonder about, and as an Ilocano, in the solid North world and all of that, like the idea of that being Ilocano and loyalty and Marcoses, all of them are synonymous.
Yeah.
I somehow see a parallel to that, or at least in terms of discourse, that and a criticism of the Dutertes or a criticism of something Sara said, the whole Shimenot, whatever, is being portrayed as a kind of an attack on the Visayas people or Visayan people or attack on Mindanao as a whole. Do Dutertes, obviously they're absolutely popular. Obviously they have, all the surveys show that they have almost universal approval rating, 95% with margin of error. But do they represent Mindanao? And the reason I'm saying that is earlier this year, I'm sure you were put on the spot and you were one of the Mindanao leaders who came out. Duterte would speak as if he's the Lord of Mindanao and like, oh, we're going to separate from you guys if you mistreat my daughter or something like that. That came off as very presumptuous, to be honest about this.
Yeah.
What is the state of play? What is the real case? To what degree is Mindanao and Duterte synonymous?
There's a saying, funny saying that the more successful you are, the more relatives success is relative, right?
Yeah.
The more successful you are, the more relatives
Tips
you
you out.
have. It's funny because
Because he says he has Moro relatives and roots and all. In Beijing, he said, I have Muslim and Chinese blood, things like that. Like,
well, I'm talking about how the more successful a person is. Of course, that's really one of the major pulling strings that you can gather people in together, right? And remember, former President Duterte is from Mindanao, really, and he's I guess, the first Mindanaoan president. That should mean something,
of course.
right? And before even becoming the president, he was really, really popular. If not even in Mindanao, but even in Luzon, right? Because he presented this new brand of politics, the
Exhibit
tough
A,
man,
Davao,
yes, and his fight against drugs, illegal drugs, etc. So it's kind of breath of fresh air from the usual politicians that we see, yung mga katsuot na ganito, tapos rolled up yung sleeves niya. So it's not even Mindanao per se, di ba? But if you talk about why there's certain degree of influence, I should say, in Mindanao, it's because number one, you have to look at the demography in Mindanao. Many of the Mindanaoans are Visayan settlers. The original inhabitants of Mindanao, the Lumads and the Muslims, are now became the minorities of Mindanao.
Marginalized.
And minorities.
Which President
marginalized.
Duterte correctly emphasized
Exactly.
historical I mean, one of the things that got my attention with Digong early on was, talking about marginalization of the Muslim brothers and sisters. He even explained what Allahu Akbar means, that God is great. This doesn't mean, like, I remember in meeting the Avance, they did that. So I can understand if you're a Moro, you see for the first time a presidential eventual president speak the truth of the Moro people in a way no mainstream politician has done. And he backed up the Bangsamoro peace process of Pinoy, probably the only thing. And I personally had a column. I said, the Bangsamoro peace process and the referendum was the finest moment of Duterte. So I can imagine at the emotional level, Digong can connect like no other Filipino president or even national politician for that matter, right? That's why I'm asking you this.
Yeah. So you have to going back to the demography, you have to be culturally sensitive of the composition of Mindanao. Duterte has that gift.
Yes.
Duterte, the
Digong, we mean. Digong. Just to be
Digong
clear.
has this gift. He can talk with Visayan. Of course, obviously,
He's from there,
he's a Cebuano speaking politician. And he's street smart. People can really identify with him easily, right? And then he knows when to tap certain issues that actually get the attention from different kinds of people, right? So he's a mix of everything of Mindanao. And I guess that's how she personified the politics that he had for the longest time as mayor. Remember, Davao City is an urban city. Most from Tausugs, Magindanaoan, Maranao, Cebuano speaking, and many other tribes.
Mosaic.
Mindanao is practically the melting pot of the entire Philippines because you have Ilocanos
Ilocanos
there.
too, yes.
You have Ilocano settlers there. You have
Yes.
Cebuano settlers.
Yeah.
You have Kapampangan there in Mindanao. So Mindanao is actually the lupang pangako, pinangako sa mga
you're
settlers,
right.
Because you cannot promise something to the real owner. I cannot promise you if you own a certain, certain stuff. I cannot promise you that because it's yours in the first place. Lupang pangako is pinangako sa those who are coming in.
Right.
So it's a mixture of everything. So Duterte has Davao, as the place of where he served for the longest time as mayor, had the access of talking with these people and tapping their sensitivities. So I guess that's the kind of, and it brought him to the presidency. So along with that popularity from Mindanao, with the kind of macho looking and the tough talking and the street smart and everything, the Filipinos in general felt that there's something new to political scenes, right?
But that was 2015. Now it's 2024. And earlier this year, Digong is still popular and all, but it's not the same Digong of 2015. He's no longer the president. Coming out and saying Mindanao will separate, wasn't that too presumptuous?
For me, it's not something for the former president to speak of in the first place. I know he has Moro blood in him.
So that's legit.
I think he's claiming that he was.
He is,
from his mother's side, that he somehow shared ancestry with the Sampurna clans. The Sampurna clans. And so, but as to speak about independence and to use this argument of that the arguments that more of the Moro, these two revolutionary fronts, I think for somebody who is not a card holder member or an organic member,
Yeah.
or someone who uh, hasn't grown or hasn't experienced firsthand the brunt of armed conflict, that person has no right and has no authority to speak about independence in the first
Then
place.
it's presumptuous. Yeah.
I'm not talking about the former president, anybody.
Anybody. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Number two, we already gave up the call for independence already. The Moro National Liberation Front has settled with autonomy. I'm talking about factions in the MNLF. You have the Muslim Insema and even the Miswari faction. Already they have embraced autonomy. Now MILF, Moro Islamic Liberation Front, has already signed peace agreements and they have settled for political autonomy. So there's no more talks of independence.
Right.
And to bring that up,
It's counterproductive. It's not helpful.
in a time where there's some sort of breakaway from political alliances from 2022 is something the timing is of question, is of suspect, right? I personally do not want the narrative of independence, who by the way killed a lot of our brethren. When you talk of independence, it brings a lot of bad memories.
Trauma.
We've done that. We've passed over that stage. Let's move on. And so even the Moro fronts have already moved on.
So you're saying
So-
do not exploit that part of history for political purposes.
Exactly.
It's unfair. It's unjust. It's wrong.
It's wrong. It's morally wrong. We're talking about a cause that has put 6 feet under so many brave men, women, and
Children. I mean, even children. Yeah, exactly.
So I think the timing. I'm not talking about and I'm talking about anybody who steps up and say, let's talk about independence and the background. For example, the backdrop. If you really try to analyze that, it's only because of political differences or political disunity. That is to me is an insult to the memory of those who have died, and not only from the side of the Moro fronts, but even our troops.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah,
died.
both sides have paid a lot of
Yeah,
price.
they've died fighting. They've died protecting.
Yeah.
They've died. They've left families. Many have turned into orphans and widows. I mean, what about their death? Are you saying that you
In
forget
vain.
about we forget about their death and let's go back again to the old issue of independence? No. So it's enough. We said enough. Let's move on.
Is there a distinct Mindanao perspective? Because for a lot of us outside Mindanao, our understanding is that because of the distinct history of conflict there, civil war even some would call it, because of the sectarian and ethno-linguistic aspect to this, the approach and understanding of politics is slightly different from us in the rest of the country. Although, of course, the rest of country is extremely diverse too. As a Baguio boy, I don't relate to Manila people on so many levels. Forget about the Palawan, whatever. But some would say that may explain why the Dutertes, in particular, have a very different approach to things. And perhaps it resonates in a way that we, from the outside of Mindanao, kind of finds like, hindi ito tugma sa pangailangan nating bansa. So, as you can see, I'm very careful not to use labels here. All I'm trying to say is I'm trying to understand why there's a very distinct, unique approach to governance, for that matter. How do you read that read for that matter? Does that resonate with you, that kind of reading of the Duterte brand of governance and its appeal?
I think it has something to do also of the experience, diba? Kasi we've talked Mindanao, the history of Mindanao. Among the three island provinces, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, Mindanao is a repository of the memories, even bad and good, of the history of the Philippines.
Crucible of Philippine history.
Exactly. So apart the Spanish, of course, we've known this. Spanish tried to invade Mindanao, and we resisted.
Not very successful, yeah.
Not very successful. Here comes the Americans now. The Americans, when they came, after the Treaty of Paris, right? After the Treaty of Paris, it's important that we need to relearn again history for us to understand our condition now. Now, after the Treaty of Paris, when Visayas and the Luzon was, I hate to say this, but according to historical accounts, you know this for a fact, I guess, no? You're knowledgeable about history, was sold to America. Mindanao was not part of that, right? So they have sent the Thomasites, they call it the Thomasites, because the ship that carried them to Mindanao was the USS Thomas. And these are not teachers, these are veterans of their campaign against the Red Indians, General Pershing. So they were brought into Mindanao under the slogan of peacetime. But the peacetime really is to secure all the bolos and all the arms of the Moro people, etc. But these bolos or these campilans, you may think that we are trigger happy, but this is actually a symbolism of bravery, of gallantry, of all the virtues
which kept the Spanish conquistador away.
Exactly. So Mindanao was tried to be part of the protectorate state of the United States. At first, they didn't want to really place Mindanao as part of the Philippines.
Yeah.
But they wanted Mindanao
as a separate
entity. After 10 years, maybe grant Mindanao independence. Simultaneously, for example, parallel with the Philippines. Now, this is very evident by the declaration, through the declaration of Dansalan Declaration, 1924, and also the Zamboanga Declaration, where it says that the Moros wanted Mindanao as part of, colony of the, part of the protectorate, sort of protectorate under the Americans. So the intention was there's a parallel Commonwealth. After 10 years, Macnaughey-Law, yung tidings sa Macnaughey-Law, after 10 years, grant the independence to the Philippines, and the Mindanao grant independence. It was only after the election, I guess, when the Republican lost. I don't know which president are we talking here, but when Woodrow Wilson became president, the change of the politics
was it
and
after
the trajectory.
Taft? Yeah, was
after
it
Taft,
I think,
trajectory of Mindanao, how they would deal with Mindanao. Before, during the Republicans, it was a military administration. When the Democrats came into power, they changed that into a civilian administration. So you have appointees like Teofisto Gingona, the father.
Right.
That's why the Gingonas are now in Balingasag. They're the first settlers. You have the Makaraig, the grandfather of
Arroyo,
because they tried to introduce civilian administration.
From Pampanga, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. Most of them are judges. No, this is the Moro province now. So going back now to the present, so you have that sort of the history that you need to protect your domain, that you are pushed against the wall. That if you don't do any bold actions in order to at least make people see you and feel you and hear you, you will lose everything, right? So you need to have at least that semblance of yung ferocity in you, I guess.
Right.
So that moving fast forward to this current era that we have now.
But before that, I just
you're
want to
talking
ask
about Duterte, right?
Yeah.
Duterte he's able to at least somehow bring that kind of experience in the past
and sensibility,
and then put that in sensibilities and put it as part of his persona.
Definitely. I always found that,
forceful and
I absolutely agree. I mean, that was always one thing about Duterte that I felt a lot of mainstream commentaries missed. That, there's always this idea he's just like a fascistic, right-wing killer guy. And I said, but you're also forgetting there's another dimension. It doesn't make okay the other things that went wrong, but there's another aspect to him, including this kind of a multicultural, historically conscious understanding of the traumas and pains of Mindanao in ways that, again, very few national politicians, let alone presidents in Philippine history, have communicated. Before we go to the last part of this conversation, Mrs. Barm, I appreciate that you brought out the history, which is everything, to people who are historically conscious. Perhaps, us Filipinos, we have to really work on that, and that's one of my frustrations, which is why I do what I do.
But you're doing good in preserving
In my
our
own
history,
little way,
your books,
exactly.
yeah.
Congressman Zia, when did this idea of Philippines and Moro brothers and all seeing each other as one really begin to take root? Because your argument is up until early 20th century and the advent of American colonialism, Muslim Mindanao was essentially a different universe, right? In many ways. So when did this whole of nation, this integrated approach, amalgamation rather, come in and going to the BARM discussion, how do we make this work? Because Congressman Zia, I mean, you are perhaps one of the very few Moro Muslim Filipinos who has this kind of national, international profile, considering you're what, close to 10% of the population? We're yet to have
Yeah, right now?
something like that. I mean,
Yeah, parang ganon.
but
yeah.
that's big enough for, because
But
there's
we have actually, we're talking about the original, I mean, locals from Mindanao, Muslim Mindanao, right? You're not talking about the reverts and...
No, I'm talking about
First,
if Muslim Mindanao
the culture,
and Filipinos
not the
all
religion,
across the
not the
country.
religion, right? The culture.
The culture, yeah,
the culture,
ethno-linguistic rather than
Okay.
just religious, right? Because my sense is our Muslim brothers and sisters are underrepresented in our institutions. How many senators we have had? I mean, we can
The
debate
last
about
time we had
Robin Hood
Muslim
Padilla,
senator, almost 40 years ago.
Supreme Court. Again, we can have the discussion about that. In fairness to President Duterte, he tried to bring in more voices into the governance at the highest level, but it's still far away from, I think, where we should be. So, how do you think we can push this nation-building project towards a better future? Because in my reading, we're far from where we should be.
Yeah.
Although we're moving in the right direction thanks to the BARM and the referendum and the peace process. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm a patriot, and as a Filipino patriot, I believe nation building is an ongoing project, and we're far from where we need to be. We're probably 4 out of 10, right? How do we go from 4 to 7? Forget about 10, it will take some time. Including the question of our Muslim brothers and sisters feeling they belong to the rest of the country. Me, because of my very multicultural background, I can easily traverse all sorts of world. I can go to Latin America, I can do the Muslim world, I can be among my Ilocano brothers and sisters. But I felt that, if I talk to a more brother, like when I was in Marawi a few years ago, and then I talked to a fellow, let's say Ilocano or whatever, there's still that kind of a gap, kind of a cultural gap. And I don't want to put religion into that. I think it's way more than
cultural.
that. How do we close that gap to make us a more integrated, amalgamated Philippines?
Okay. Well, I do not want to assume mastery on the matter because this is something comprehensive.
It's a personal opinion.
It's a complex.
Absolutely.
It's a complex issue. Well, I personally believe that in terms of representation, there seems to be the sheer lack of number of
Belonging is
representation.
shared belongings.
If we really want to be inclusive, we don't just say, okay, we understand the Filipino Muslims, we will grant them the BARM, because the BARM is a peace resolution mechanism, remember, and that's actually acknowledgement and recognition for the Muslim communities, no? But we're talking about of national scope, right? You've said, and you've mentioned it, we don't have we talk about national politics. How do we bring in other perspective, not necessarily Muslims, but even those who are part of the community, indigenous communities.
Lumans, yeah.
Lumans, right?
Absolutely.
We simply lack the way to appreciate them because there's no representation
Absolutely.
in the national polity. If you go to the Senate is now becoming a representation not of Luzon or Metro Manila, but a
few
representation
celebrity
of
families.
Families, right?
Yeah.
So it does not reflect the whole of the nation. You talk about whole of the nation approach. You start with the national polity and how to the decision-making process involve other, other backgrounds or other inputs from different communities. We are an archipelagic country. We have so much to contribute for the building of this nation. If we are only appreciative of the possible contributions of all these communities all around us, make them heard and then be part of the tapestry, the ongoing tapestry of the narrative of Filipino mainstream society. Unfortunately, when you talk about Filipinos, probably the first thing that comes to mind is Manila, right? We talk Tagalog. but there are so many dialects and
Absolutely.
languages, Bisaya, Ilonggo, and
Ilocano,
Ilocano,
yeah.
right? And so I guess there's the mindset of being centrist. I mean, I think this is part of our colonial heritage that we inherited from the
But
Spanish.
Malaysians have that too. The Imperial Kuala Lumpur, if you go to Sabah, they'll tell you, right?
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
they're parliamentary. They have regional states, right?
right. So you're
Maybe
assure representation.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. But fortunately, we have in the BARM. But do we
Yeah.
have that in other areas? No. So what I'm trying to point out really is there's so many. If you want to talk about how to unite the Philippines, there's so many. You have to categorize and compartmentalize it. If you're talking about decision making under this centrist Republican form of government, you have the Senate and the House.
Yeah.
We only have how many members, Muslim congressmen in the House out of the 300 current members? We only have, I think, 5 or 6.
Not even 10.
Right?
I mean, like, you can
You
count
can-
with your
yeah,
hands,
you
yeah.
can- yeah. If you go to the national legislature, I mean, in the Senate, how many Muslims do you have? Only one, Robin Padilla. But Robin Padilla is, in terms of background, of course, he's a
And I'm not
he's a
sure
metropolis guy.
I'm not
He's
sure he's
known-
spending enough time representing his more brothers and sisters, to be
Exactly, but
honest about that.
I'm just saying that Robin Padilla, he is a Muslim. He can speak
Robin
for
Hood.
us.
He's a
Robin
Robin
Hood
Hood.
Padilla. He can speak for the Muslim, but the inputs that is, I'm talking about the perspective.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. Not just the urge. Yeah.
Not not just
perspective. Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
religious affiliation.
Right.
Because we're talking of how to really bring in all Filipinos, so that we would be able to classify ourselves as Moros or Ilonggos or Ilocanos for that matter.
Right.
When you speak of Filipino, we have the same universal identification, for example, that we really do belong to one country, under one flag, under one constitution.
Last point, midterm elections is coming. What are we expecting for BARM? What is the state of still transition, I would rather
Yes,
say,
under
right?
transition period, yeah.
What is your read of the administration? Is the Ferdinand Marcos Jr. administration moving in the right enough direction, building
think
on
he
the
is.
gains of both Duterte and Marcos? Because one of the things I hear here is what the father started, the son will finish. In the sense that the wars got really bad during the father's time. I mean, anyone who really
Yes.
knows real history.
That's already in history
and now the
books.
son probably could hopefully end that difficult dark chapter in the Philippines in a much more conclusive manner.
Okay, I think the president is in right direction when he says there won't be any extension again this time. Well, if we are a democratic country, right? So suffrage, the right to vote, the right
Yeah.
to select your own leaders, is a primordial right given to all of each and every one of us. So I guess the purpose of that transition is in order to give way to at least put up the necessary institutions, building of institutions for the ARMM from the previous structure, political structure, patterned after the national government. So you have the legislature, you have the executive, and the judiciary. Unfortunately, we weren't able to really produce a legislative issue,
Yeah.
a structure because of the PD 1083. So you need to revert
Yeah.
again to that law. So only the legislature and the executive. You have the members of the assembly and the regional government. So after that, you have the parliamentary system, right, and the BARM. So in order to transition from this institution, political institution, to that, you need more years to put up, of course, resources. And I'm talking about manpower.
Yeah.
The amalgamation of items, etc. No?
Training, human capital,
etc., the
capacity
skills
building,
and the talent.
yeah.
So you need more time. So I think it's reasonable to have 3 years. For me is very short. I was part of the BARM before in the first.
Yes, I remember
So
that.
3 years is very short for a transition. Remember the Good Friday
The
agreement?
Ireland and
Yes,
Northern
they had, I
Ireland.
guess, 10 years of before
Yeah.
they held the first election. I may be wrong, no? But that's how I heard it. That's how I learned in the books. Nagkaroon a certain number of years, but 3 years is not enough
too
for me.
short,
So
yeah.
6 years is enough. No, it's a reasonable number of years for the transition period to really fully and faithfully deliver what has been mentioned in the agreement, no, in the BOL, in the Bangsamoro Organic Law. So, meaning to say the Parliament needs to set up the institution. Apart from that, they need to adopt yung codes like taxation, revenue, etc. All of these things have already been enacted and approved by the
Right.
Parliament. So there's no more reason for the extension anymore. But the issue really, the catch, Richard, is there's two tracks. And I think the government should be conscious about this. There's the political track, which is part of that talks of the political tracks is the formation and the restructuring of the arm to BARM, the parliamentary. The one track that I think we need to focus on also and be conscious about is the normalization track, and this is the decommissioning process.
You mean the guns?
So there's no exit agreement yet.
Yet.
Yeah. And the normalization process is the transition of camps, revolutionary rebel camps, MLF, into a civilian community. But before they can transition, there's also a package, parang kulatilla,
Yeah.
a package that the government should produce and should deliver to those who will be returning
demobilized
back.
and reintegrated, hopefully.
Who will be decommissioned,
Yeah.
right? And there's a certain livelihood package that they need to receive. Again, budget hearing, we need to see if there are sizable amount for that portion of the agreement, the decommissioning, where the Philippines can say, this is our priority because we've given enough budget for all of these programs and this decommissioning process to really succeed. No, that's one. Number two is, you remember, there's no exit agreement yet. And so you have the international, they call it the, literal talaga na yung barrel, ibibigay sa'yo, then they will put that in a warehouse, in a safe house, then it will be handled by Turkey. I guess Turkey yung international decommissioning body. Yeah, Turkey.
Turkey is interesting. Interesting.
Turkey. So literal, the physical surrender. Ibibigay sa'yo, kukunin yung gobyerno, then they will put it in a safe box, in a hardware. I don't know where. Of course, it's going to be classified. So this is the thing that we need, I guess, to really be focused also. To really understand, because we're only the issue of the BARM really is it's mostly substantially the talks is dominated by the issue of the placing of institution through political means, no exercise like enactments of laws, etc. So there's also the decommissioning part, which I guess the government should really put primacy on, because we're talking of this priority of the government. It's a state obligation of the government, witnessed by international contact groups, that the Philippines would really put primacy, importance, and priority on the decommissioning process. And that boils down to budget. That boils down to issue of magkano.
The devil is in the details.
Exactly.
Congressman Zia, thank you so much for the tour de force. We went from big picture, we went, deep history, and obviously also this micro technical logistical issue. Really, really appreciate that conversation.
Appreciate that. Thank you for having me.
Hopefully
It's a
this will be
pleasure,
the beginning of more conversations, because I'm sure as we head into elections and more developments in the BARM, we will be more than happy to have you, on our show. Catch us again next week here on One News. You can also check out the long conversation on Spotify, YouTube, and Google Podcasts. I'm Richard Haydarian, and that was a view from Manila. We're One News, all sides, all the time.